Life is hard, and we're out here doing larger-than-life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more. All right, back again with the one and only Mr. James Appleton of the 46 of 46 podcast, and we're talking on another worthy outdoors topic that we both have experience in. I've done the Appalachian Trail. I've done some long-distance kayaking. James has done the 46 high peaks in the Adirondacks, Northville Placid Trail. So we have a little bit of experience in long distance and kind of gritty stuff, which is the topic of today's conversation. G.R.I.T made an acronym of how you can use this to push through on some of these really difficult journeys that James and I have accomplished. So let's dive right into number one. Goals are very important, and breaking down your goals on a big adventure like something like climbing the 46 high peaks, Northville Placid Trail, Appalachian Trail, long distance, anything, you're going to need to break these bigger goals down into shorter chunks. So James, how did you break down the 46? I know you've written a book about it recently, which I'll put a link below for people to go read if they'd like to check that out. But how did you break this down to make it attainable? Because that's a lot of peaks to climb, and you're trying to do it in basically a short time period. So how was that for you?
Sure. It can be very overwhelming when you think of like there's 46 mountains, so you have to climb all 46, and it's like at that point, where do I start? But like anything, if you just break it down to like the smallest chunks, suddenly nothing is really that daunting. So I pretty much broke it down by trailheads. You know, from this trailhead, I know I'm going to hike all of these mountains together by looking at the map and looking at the trails and talking to people. And I knew, okay, these 10 mountains you hike from here, and you'll hike these 3 one day, these 3 the next day. And I just did that for the entire 46 high peaks, specifically for that. And I had it on a list written down. I had rough mileages written next to it. So when I knew which day I was able to hike, I would basically go to my list and I would say, okay, I'm going to hike this day. Here's what the weather's going to be like. Okay, what day would be good for, you know, this hike, X hike, Y hike, Z hike, whatever. And I just broke it down as small chunks as I possibly could. And then you just start grinding away. And before you know it, you're halfway there and then you're done.
And then, yes, for the Appalachian Trail, I essentially did the same thing. We're talking 2,000 plus miles. So it's a matter of taking these huge sections. I mean, you can break it down or break it up as much as you want. But at the beginning, for me, it really was almost like day by day. I mean, if you can make it 15 miles a day until you get into the swing of things, like until you start to feel good, because starting something like that, when you're fresh, you think it's going to be something and it's not. It's not that thing at all. So at the beginning for me, it was almost day by day. Like if I can make it to the next 15 miles, if I can make it to the next 10 miles, I'm exhausted. If I can make it to the next 8 miles, and then you're figuring out like which towns you can get to within a certain amount of time. And then after like a month of continuously, like this is your day in, day out, you can start to break it down into like more like larger chunks that are more plannable. So you can plan 5 days, 5 days, 5 days, and then you start hitting these bigger waypoints, because when you're talking 2,000 plus miles, it is insanely overwhelming. If you're out there every day and all you think is Katahdin, 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 it's going to feel like you're going to have a panic attack and break down. So it's a matter of like, okay, this week I want to make it to X town, which is 35, 40, 100 miles away, depending on how fast you're hiking. And then before you know it, like you said, you're hitting these big checkpoints. You're hitting like the quarter way point, you're hitting the halfway point, and that's when you really can start to look towards the end. But, you know, that's the thing, is I see a lot of people will often try to do something that they like. Everybody wants to accomplish something large. Like, it's just like, I think it's a natural human thing, but then they start and it gets overwhelming, whether it's like a diet, whether it's an exercise routine, it gets super overwhelming because you want that end goal so quickly, but that's not like attainable. And you and I and tons of people throughout all over the world have learned this like breakdown of goals. So, you know, how does that translate to your life, day-to-day life now?
I say in my podcast, I just, it's just kind of like how I live my life. It's like I am a goal seeker. Like that's how I operate the best. That's why something like, for example, the 46 high peaks, like there's a start, there's an end, there's a specific task to accomplish. I am a list guy by nature. I can't function without my yellow notepad, so I can write down I need to do all these things today, and when I do that, I crush it because I do well with those types of lists. I'm a task oriented person, so I always say figure out what your goal is, and it doesn't end there, and then make a game plan. So you got to make the game plan to what the goal is. And once you know where you're trying to get to, you obviously know where you are right now. So kind of filling in the blanks to get there, whether you work backwards or you work forwards, that's what I did with the high peaks or, any sort of hiking trail. But it's literally no different in anything I'm doing in life. I do the exact same thing. What do I want to accomplish? Okay, I'm going to work backwards. So what do I need to do to get there? And it might be a couple big jumps, and then within those big jumps, you break it down even further. And from there, it's just like little steps to doing it. And it is kind of funny how it does translate to literally everything outside of, my outdoors adventures and activities. But yeah, it seeps into every aspect of life.
So the second part of the GRIT acronym is resiliency. And as anybody who has done any sort of adventure or trip or worked a job or been outside of their house in their whole life knows things do not always going according to plan. And being resilient is a huge part of accomplishing the goals that we just talked about in the first step. So how has resiliency played into any of your adventures that you've done, even the high peaks or the Northfield Placid Trail or beyond?
I mean, if you want to accomplish the goal, unless you set these like really simple, easy goals that, anyone could accomplish, then you might not deal with problems, but just anything, you're going to deal with some problems. There's going to be times where you got to overcome, you got to keep pushing. And, with anything, it's like, there's been so many days. I know we're talking about the high peaks here. So, I'm out there just covered in rain. I'm, 8 miles back. And dude, in those situations, you're like, what am I doing out here? This sucks so hard. But it's like, I have a goal. I don't want to go out today because it's going to be crappy and pouring, but like I want to accomplish the goal. So I'm a bigger picture guy by nature. So I get out there and I do it because it doesn't have to be easy. I know what I want as the end game. So like, the work it takes to get there is fine. It's fine if it's hard because I know what I want at the end. And to me, that's pretty easy to just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. And when you go into anything, knowing there's going to be setbacks, suddenly when they happen, it's not really that, it's not that difficult to deal with. It's not that crazy. You had it. You knew it was coming. Easier to deal with that way. I don't know why people kind of tend to think that there won't be setbacks in any goal they're seeking or any problems in life. But when you kind of expect that and you plan for it, you can plan accordingly.
Yeah, and I would argue the same thing. I mean, I have had plenty of setbacks in anything I've ever tried to do. When I was on the Appalachian Trail, I just wrecked my ankle one day, and like that is a huge setback, and you just have to change your game plan. My wife and I hiked together on the Appalachian Trail. She had like a really bad foot infection that we were already running way behind schedule from previous injuries, and that set us back like another week. Like colds, like you just had to change your game plan and adapt and be resilient because like you're never going to accomplish the goal if you're just too rigid with what you think you need to be doing, because that could injure yourself more. I mean, there's so many things you have to take into account, and you can't plan for things that are going to happen. I mean, there are always going to be things outside your control. When I was kayaking the Maumee River, we were a day and a half from the end, and like a key component of my boat just snapped off of my kayak, and I was just basically limping it through the end. Like you can't plan for that. You can't plan for the weather even most of the time. So resiliency is a key part, and I think that also in the end serves you in your day-to-day life, because like with the state of the world right now, things are happening that are all out of all of our control, and we only have the ability to adapt and plan for what we have control of. Like, so you need to be resilient. And I think long distance or any sort of like goal that that either you or I have accomplished has like set us up to have that mindset, to be resilient, to continually adapt and change. So do you use this? What are some examples you would use this in your day-to-day life?
I mean, it's like you said, life's hard, dude. There's problems, there's things that go wrong all the time. So, it doesn't really matter what it is, whether you're on the trail or you're at home, or, you get your car has to go into the shop and it's going to be $2,000 to fix it. You have to you got to stop. You think, okay, let me think about this. It's really easy to just panic. And it's funny because I think a big reason why I have kind of learned these troubleshooting skills, because that's what I call people who are resilient. They have troubleshooting skills, and it is a skill set. I mean, you're not just necessarily born with the idea of being able to fix problems as they arise. But when I first got out of college, I was working in post-production at these like post-production houses in New York City, editing, video and TV type stuff. And, when like the edit bays would go wrong, the computers weren't working, the tape decks that you're loading, all this stuff, there's so many wires and cables and they're everywhere. Like it's just like a mess. So whenever something would go wrong, it would be easy to just be like, crap, it's not working, it's broken. But from that job in particular, or those doing that, I learned the skill set of, okay, slow it down, take a breath. What isn't working? Okay, the tape isn't reading, this tape deck's not reading to the computer. Okay, is the computer plugged into this, which is plugged into that? Yes, okay, so it's not that. And you just go through the list. And that is a skill set that is learned, in my opinion. You don't just naturally know to do that, but and it goes back to, taking everything step by step. I definitely learned that skill set there, and dude, it applies everywhere in life.
And I think you bring up a key point. Learned. It is not an inherent thing. It's all learned. And it's things that we have to unfortunately learn the hard way most of the time. It is not something that comes intuitively like, oh, I really need to slow down and just take this step at a time. I wish it worked like that. My life would be a hell of a lot easier if it worked that way. But yeah, I mean, resiliency is key to anything in life, in my opinion. All right, so part 3 of the GRIT acronym is intransigence, which I learned recently means uncompromising. And that is, to me, one of the most important parts of any trip planning, any long distance adventure, life, anything is, a lot of the time people argue that compromise is good, and it can be good in certain situations. But when it comes to a goal that only you have and you believe in, sometimes you just have to be bullheaded and say, no, this is what I'm doing, and nobody can tell me any different. That's how the Appalachian Trail was for me. I had a lot of reasons not to do it. I had a lot of people who told me that it was a terrible idea from a career standpoint, and sometimes you just have to shut everything off, because when you're 25 and you want to hike, a few hundred or a few thousand miles, people say, "Oh, well, you're already in a career path. You're doing this stuff," and you have to just shut it off. Say no. And I mean, that's with anything in life. Starting a podcast, I'm sure, as you can relate, James. I know very well. People are saying, "Why would you do this if you're not getting paid? Why would you do all this work for no reason?" And you just need to shut that out. And do you run into this at all? I mean, I would assume you would, because you're a human being, but how do you deal with this?
I mean, you're always going to deal with people who don't understand what you're doing. And, I do think it really does go back to that. There's like a phrase where, and nobody above you is ever going to, or nobody who's doing better than you is ever going to like step on you. It's always like something like that about like, it's always the people below you that are going to complain about what you're doing. So in a sense of, it's like, typically those people don't get it. They don't understand what you're doing, and they can't understand. So obviously it's easy to kind of pull you down to that level. And I don't surround myself with people who do that. I'm all about surrounding myself with doers. But yeah, I mean, every goal, I mean, you could ask my wife, every goal I have, she's like just as relieved when I've accomplished it as I am. Whether it was like the deer this year or the 46 years ago or the NPT. And for me, the Northville Placid Trail, like it wasn't just hiking it. Like, no, I sectioned it over a month's time, but it was like all I thought about was like, okay, what days am I going to get back out there? Okay, I'm going to go here. I need to get a ride, 2 hours to get picked up here. And then when I was done, now I had to turn it into an 8-episode podcast series. So like, it was a long process, and that was the goal. I had the vision, I had the idea, and this was happening. And most people wouldn't understand that the amount of hours that I put in writing, recording, and editing the podcast literally was the same amount of hours it took me to walk the entire trail, the 138 miles. And they just won't get it, and that's cool. You don't have to get it. You're not doing it. I'm the one doing it. So like, the same people who said that about you're hiking, the Appalachian Trail, it's like, it doesn't affect you. So I'm the one out there doing it, and you don't know what's happening in my life, in my brain, what I want in the future. So you kind of gotta like push those people's opinions away, in my opinion. And I've gotten pretty good at doing that sort of thing.
Well, you have to be when you are a person who is like you or me, because we're always doing things. And I think part of the problem, if you want to call it a problem, is today we all feel, with the way like the economy works and things like that, everybody feels that if you're not doing something for money, then you shouldn't be doing it. And it's like we've lost this passion of art or creation, just to create, just to do. And that's been like a big part of humanity for a very long time. We are creatures that create. We are creatures that do things to do them. Like, they weren't getting paid at Lascaux to paint those walls on the cave. They were just creating stuff to create. And I think that's why people do long distance hikes. That's why people do the 46, because it's like, what's the saying? The mountains are there and I must go. Like, just because it's there and it's hard, I want to do it. And, running a podcast, running a media, anything is no different than a big through hike or a big passion project. You have to be able to have those goals to, like, you obviously want people to see it. So, I mean, it's no different. It all translates. And that's the whole point I'm trying to get across with you and everyone on this series, is like, this stuff all translates. The outdoors is a vessel to teach you these lessons that are very important, that you could learn these in other places. You could learn these in sports, hard sports, anything. But, the outdoors is what I know. The outdoors is what you know. So that's why we talk on this experience.
Yeah. And it's funny how the amount of life lessons that you do learn out there translate to everything in life. And it makes you better for it. I always say that it is a life-changing thing when you make the outdoors a big part of your life. And nobody ever, takes up outdoor recreation, whether it's paddling or hiking or camping or mountain biking, whatever it is. Nobody ever takes that up and say, that was a bad idea. Nope. Never.
The fourth and final part to grit is tenacity, and essentially being determined. And that, again, as with everything else that James and I have discussed, is a learned skill. Determination does not come naturally to everyone, and it's very hard to stay determined sometimes, especially when everything sucks. So that you like a lot of, like, whether it's life, whether it's work, whether it's, climbing I climbed Hurricane Mountain with you. It was fun, but it also sucked. It was terribly cold. I was sweating, freezing. Like, these things suck, but that's part of the process of growth and learning, is like, it has to suck sometimes or you're never going to get better. So yeah, I mean, a lot of times for me especially on the bigger journeys, there are parts where it is downright miserable. It hurts. You don't want to be there. You're cold. You're hungry. You're just exhausted mentally and physically. And I think there comes a learned thing to get outside of your brain and just shut it off. It's almost like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like almost like you're looking at yourself in third person, like, man, that sucks for that guy, but I'm out here. Like, the more you get out of that shell and the more you get yourself in these uncomfortable situations, the more you can kind of just like turn that off. And I mean, it always seeps back in. I've started to do like rucking stuff. If anybody follows on Instagram, and like I'm literally carrying around 100-pound sandbag on my back, and it hurts. Like it does not feel good at all. Like for miles and miles of doing this, and it's just me. For me, it's teaching myself to just embrace that shittiness and the suckiness, and to just be and to accept that it's going to suck until I'm done. And like I've never been able to learn that anywhere but the outdoors, and maybe like the gym. Those are the two places where I've gotten that experience. So how do you handle that experience, and how do you handle going to that, well, I don't know what they call that place, but it can be a nasty place to get to, but it's vital, I think, for doing these kind of things that we enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it's all type 2 fun. I would say barbell training in any kind, stretch is very type 2. Outdoors, hiking, paddling, the whole thing. I think it is too. There's times where it's just generally fun. But for the most part, I would say it's that type 2 fun. But for me, it's pretty easy because I'm a big picture guy by nature. I don't really sweat the details or like the small stuff. I do not sweat the small stuff like at all. So for me, it's easy because it's just like, well, what's the goal? What's the end game? Well, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I care about. Like to get there, whatever. It is what it is. This'll happen or that'll happen. So for me, I guess I'm fortunate in the sense of I look towards the end, and that's what keeps me pushing, because that's what I want. I want that end, goal, whatever it is. So, to get there, it's going to take this and that and this and that. And that's, to me, it's fine because that's what you have to do because I know what I want. Whereas if you're not like a bigger picture type of person, and not everybody is, and all those little details and those little things matter a lot to you, well, then I do think that you're going to struggle to be a very determined individual. I just feel like it's not going to be easy for you. And you need to be a determined individual to, break that mold, which, you're in that mold because you're probably not. But, there's obviously very detail-oriented people who are also very determined, but I would also argue they probably have a lot of that bigger picture mentality as well. They might have it all. And if that's the case, congratulations, you've won life. But for me, I don't sweat the small stuff, so I can easily just push through the crap.
Well, the good thing about what you're saying is if someone is not that way, they can teach themselves to be that way. It's just harder and it sucks. I mean, we've talked in a last episode, we've both come from backgrounds of being unhealthy and being just having not the greatest lifestyle for being in physical shape. And I used to be that way. I used to not want to do things. I used to lay around and I didn't want to accomplish anything. I just, the woe is me mindset. And I literally taught myself out of that, and it creeps back in and it sucks. It always sucks. That's the whole point, is it always sucks. It's always not fun, but it's a learning to just accept that that's okay. It's okay to be a little tired and a little hungry and a little sore and a little beat up. That's okay. You're not going to die, and that makes it feel a lot better. So from someone, to not preach, I do this. This is my life every day. It's never an easy, just super motivated today to go do this. No, it's a taught. I've built this walls around my, I'm literally talking right now. If I don't live up to what I'm saying, people are this guy's full of shit. So I'm building these things around me to keep myself accountable, which in the end, the whole thing boils down to that one word, is accountability. So
yeah, sure. And there's also a level of independence that grows from being determined and being a goal seeker and whatnot too, because once you get that confidence that I accomplished X and I did it, well, great. What's next? And you have that chip on your shoulder, that confidence to go after the next thing, or you'll make it to the end, because at least for myself, I almost say to myself, if there's something I want to do and I'm just not doing it, but I want to do it, I just look at myself in the mirror and I mean, not literally, but I say well, why aren't you doing it? What's your problem? Why do you suck? Like, just get up and do it. You can do it. Other people would do it, or like this person would do it, or that person would do it, and you're just as strong and just as capable and just as independent and that to do it yourself as well. And I say, you're right. And like, that's the pep talk I need. And it's efficient in my mind, because I want, this goes back to I'm a bigger picture person and I don't really sweat the details. I want that, mentality within me. So I go after it. I seek it. That's what I'm looking for, because that's what I want to have. And not everything comes naturally. A lot of things are worked for and taught, but it's like, I know that's what I want. So that's what I'm going for. And, yeah, sometimes it sucks, but the end game of being the type of person where like nothing will phase you, whatever goal you want. Yep, I got it. That's a powerful thing.
Absolutely. And, if you guys agree with us, if you found this to be of any value, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. James also has a YouTube channel where all of his 46 of 46 podcasts get posted. And, I will put a link down again to where I said James's book, which basically details this as well, about how to accomplish a huge task, which is hiking the 46. You can get that on James's website, and we will be back again soon with another topic in the outdoors that is very near and dear to James and myself.